Hey there and welcome back to another Dreamworks video. And today, I want to talk a little bit about the character of Jack Frost and the character of the Man in the Moon from Rise of the Guardians. Because, I've watched this film quite a lot. Every Easter, I have to fire this bad boy up. And I just kind of accept everything that's happened to Jack Frost. But when you think about it, he has a really rough go of it in both his backstory and also during the events of the film. And goddamn, considering that the Man in the Moon is supposed to be some sort of benevolent godlike figure that watches out for the world, and the Guardians, he's absurdly cruel to Jack for hundreds of years. Like seriously, hundreds of years. So let me explain. Based on the backstory we've been given, Jack was a teenager, around 14 I think, who lived with his family in America around 300 years before the start of the film's main events. One day during winter, he and his little sister decide to go out ice skating on a frozen lake, but their happy, fun-filled day quickly turns to tragedy, as his sister gets stuck in the middle of the lake as the ice begins to crack, and Jack sacrifices his life to protect her, eventually drowning in the icy waters. So already, yikes, pretty traumatic way to die, all things considered. But of course, feeling pretty bad for this kid who gave his life for his family, the Man in the Moon decides to revive him as an immortal winter spirit with powers of ice and wind. So yeah, that's actually not such a bad fate, all things considered. I mean, it's not like the Man in the Moon assassinated him or anything. He was just helping him out. So when you look at it initially, the Man in the Moon seems almost completely and utterly benevolent and kind and sweet. But of course, there is a catch to all of this. Because yes, there's always a catch. For some reason, which I'm pretty sure is never ever explained again, the Man in the Moon decides that Jack should have all his memories stripped away, left with only the name that the moon gives him, Jack Frost. So really, this is when I realized that the Man in the Moon is kind of a piece of shit. Because yes, whilst he did resurrect this kid, he left him completely alone for 300 years. Couldn't he have revived him, I don't know, a few decades or centuries later? Jack Frost has to be severely depressed by this point. Because not only does he have no memories of his life beforehand, but no one can see him. Because being able to see him depends on the belief of children in his existence. So right from the get-go, he's alone. He knows nothing about who he is beyond his name. He knows nothing about where he is, what his purpose is, and what he needs to do to move on with his life. He doesn't know how to get people to see him and believe in him, and he has no way to know where to find other spirits who might be able to give him some sort of guidance or advice. And all the while, the little bastard on the moon is just sitting around watching him suffer. And it's like, why? Why would you do this? Why are you such a cruel little man? Is he lonely on the moon so he decides to take it out on poor old Jack Frost? Because 300 years of almost complete isolation, almost no contact except for other spirits, most of whom he rarely sees. I mean, in the film he mentions he hasn't seen the Easter Bunny in over 40 years. That sort of isolation would weigh heavily on this kid's shoulders. And hell, he was only a mental age of 14 when he got resurrected. Imagine doing that to a teenager. For shame, Moon Man. But it gets worse for poor old Jack Frost. Because after that 300 years is up, guess who comes back to call in his debt? Why, it's the Man in the Moon. And he makes Jack a guardian. But only so that he has another soldier to use as a metaphorical meat shield against pitch black. And we'll come back to the ethics of that situation in a little bit, because once again we need to shit on Moon Man and his memory wipe. Because would you look at that? None of the other Guardians got their lives and memories and hopes and dreams and aspirations stripped away. And not only that, but he neglected to tell anybody else, so nobody actually knew to go and find Jack to help him get his memories back. I mean, Tooth Fairy could have cleared this up for him in minutes. Damn. But instead, just full on no contact. Just let him suffer. 300 years. That's fair and reasonable, isn't it? And even worse, he actually bothers to communicate with the other Guardians. Maybe not with words per se, but you can't deny that he does at least interact with them. I mean, they mention how he contacts them in the film itself, even if it's only about Guardian type things. But anyway, it's at this point in the story that Jack's forced amnesia becomes plot relevant, because of course it does. Is the Man in the Moon secretly Albus Dumbledore with all this 4D chess and character manipulation to line everybody up in the exact position they need to be to succeed? Because he kind of feels like it. He sacrifices almost all the Guardians in pursuit of his goal of defeating Pitch Black. Because, without having to earn the memories, Jack doesn't go through the same growth. He doesn't make the same mistakes. Sandy doesn't get murdered, the Tooth Fairy Palace doesn't get ransacked, Easter doesn't get cancelled, and they don't all combine forces to defeat Pitch. Although, on the other hand, wouldn't he have been able to do all this if he was super confident and powerful? Just food for thought, Mr. Moon. Just food for thought. Because it's such a deeply specific set of events that cause Pitch Black's downfall. So on reflection, it does come across as being planned down to the letter by the Moon, which in the end just makes him feel wholly manipulative and borderline evil. Which makes him seem like a bit of an idiot. I mean, things could have diverged so easily. I mean, Jack becomes the Guardian, yes, that always happens. But then they need to specifically go on a tooth hunt. And Santa, Easter Bunny, and Tooth Fairy need to get put to sleep so Sandy and Jack fight Pitch alone, leading to Sandy's death. And then Jack needs to get his teeth and abandon the Guardians so that Easter fails and Bunny loses his power. Then he needs to confront Pitch in Antarctica and lose his staff, but gain his memories back. So then he can have the inner power to fix his staff and save the Tooth Fairies, as well as go to Jamie's house to try and get him to believe in the Easter Bunny and the Guardians again. And then building off this, Jamie has to specifically link the fact that there is snow in his bedroom to Jack Frost. And side note, how does anybody know about Jack Frost in the first place? He's a brand new spirit, only 300 years old. But if Jamie knew his name, why couldn't he see him? You telling me this kid knows and believes in the Sandman? Come on now. And yet, no one else can see Jack Frost. It doesn't make sense. But yeah, the whole plan depends on Jamie having heard of Jack Frost from his mum, not believing in him until that moment. And it seems like a lot is riding on this really flimsy plan by the Moon Man. And it seems like this could have been avoided in a really obvious way. I don't know, by being open and honest and saving your Guardians a lot of heartache and pain. What an absolute dweeb. But of course, perhaps you might argue, oh, well, the Man in the Moon isn't really a man at all. He's just a magical spirit that's linked to the moon, or something like that. He mustn't be able to directly communicate with the Guardians, apart from his light, whatever that is. How do they understand what the light means? It doesn't make... But anyway, maybe that's why he seems so distant and closed off. Perhaps that's why he comes across as so manipulative. On one hand, withholding information and stringing characters along to defeat Pitch Black, whilst also avoiding getting directly involved. After all, if he could intervene, surely he would intervene, wouldn't he? Wrong! Because Moon Man in this franchise is apparently not some disembodied spirit thingy. In lore, in his book, he's literally a magic dude who lives on the moon. He can contact the world if he wants to. He watches the planet. He listens in. And yet he does jack shit. He's completely unhelpful, and he just lets things play out with minimum interference, despite him being fully able to. I mean, he's got to be pretty strong. He basically raised up Jack to be a god. So simply put, the dude is a turd, and he doesn't deserve the respect and reverence that gets heaped on him by the Guardians. He's the worst. And now that I've thought through just how unhelpful and awful he is, I'll never be able to see him in the same light when I watch this film again. Anyway though, that being said, these have all just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think about the Moon from Rise of the Guardians, now that we've talked through some of his issues? Do you still think he's some benevolent deity? Or a cruel taskmaster? I'm curious to hear what you think, so make sure to like, comment and subscribe, and let me know.